Welcome to the Tech Sales Show, where we are dedicated to making you a better tech seller, sharing tried and true sales strategies and answering your questions weekly.
Hey, Bobby.
What's up, Brian?
We're kicking off a new series. It's series number 25. This is episode number 140. Coming up on the 3-year mark, Bobby.
That's
pretty big
amazing.
stuff.
Yeah.
Fun. Listenership has really grown. We appreciate everyone listening, and please share it with a friend that's also in tech sales. This, again, is a 4-part series. We're going to talk about emotional intelligence. This has been one. We did a listener's choice on this a while back, kind of on self-awareness and stuff, but this one's meant to kind of unpack that a lot deeper. And so in this series, we've collected a lot of data from different books. Emotional Intelligence 2.0 is something we've talked about, for a couple of years now on podcasts. We've got data from consultants. We've got data from the Harvard Business Review to build this series out. So this is a topic that I'm really passionate about. I love it. It's it's kind of the game behind the game, before you even get involved in a deal, a pursuit. Start working for a new client. Like, this is the stuff that happens, technology and agnostic. This is the stuff that really moves the needle when it comes to pursuits and winning business.
Yeah, people buy from people that they like, and obviously this is a big part of being liked and being received well, right? So this is actually a 4-part series. It's going to be very interesting to kind of dive through all the parts. You want to kind of talk about what each week's going to be like, Brian?
Yeah, let's do that. So episode 1, we're really just going to kind of unpack what emotional intelligence is, and it's kind of 4 components: self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, and relationship management. And we'll get to those more deeply in a moment, because that will be much of what we talk about today. Next week, we'll talk about 7 toxic behaviors of people that have low emotional intelligence. So again, today we'll unpack what even is this. And then the second episode, we'll talk about what impact does bad emotional intelligence have. Episode 3, we'll talk about a number of ways that you can become both more self-aware and socially aware. And this isn't socially from a political standpoint. This is socially from just recognizing behaviors that are going on around you. And then episode number 4 is all about, we'll finish up the series with that. That's all about self-management, relationship management. How do you better manage conversations with others and manage your reactions to the environment around you?
Good stuff. I can remember working backwards through those, kind of how I managed myself in different spots in my career. Man, I wish I would have heard some of this sooner. I can remember the socially aware stuff where I really was so focused on what I wanted to accomplish that I missed the bigger picture many, many times. And I'm sure people that are listening that know me, if there's anyone out there listening that knows me, you'll be able to identify me in every one of the 7 toxic behaviors at some point, but I think I've come a long way. And I think we can help you do that as well. This is an interesting topic where, I coach a lot of people today, and some people I know when I'm coaching them, they're not going to make much progress, right? They have a low aptitude to get better, and they have a low work ethic as it relates to maybe fixing some of the problems that they have. But this EQ is something that everyone can fix. It's not you're not stuck with what you were born with. People say IQ is something that you had from the day you were born, and your ability to learn and be smart. That stuff is kind of at a plateaued level. Only swingable points either direction, but this one is something that we can learn and work on and adapt to and change the way we interact with people holistically and get better and better at this, going from a very low score, and there's a lot of assessments out there, to a very, very high score, and really change the way people think about you. One of the things that I'll challenge anyone listening that's thinking, I've got good EQ, I don't need this series, I'm going to skip back to something else. What do you think really would happen if you sent out a 360 review to your peers and asked them to answer a bunch of questions about how you handle yourself, your mood, how well you react or how little you react to stimuli when it's created? How many people would say, there's no one that gets under his or her skin? All those things are what we're going to talk about the next 4 weeks. And I guess if you are perfect at all those things, go ahead and hit pause and pick a different episode. But I doubt there's anyone listening, including myself, that couldn't use a lot from this.
And in fact, many, if not most, senior leaders for large companies and large organizations take these 360 reviews to find gaps and holes too. So taking one of these surveys is an indication of tenure or maturity. It's finding what the hole. That's what senior leaders are looking to do. They're looking to find holes in themselves and repair those holes. Because to your point, this is different than like an IQ test. This is something like I can find these holes and then fix these holes.
No doubt, and we'll talk about it throughout this series, I'm sure. But as Brian mentioned, Emotional Intelligence 2.0 is a good book. Whether you buy the print book or the audio book, the link will be in the show notes. But there is an EQ assessment that you can take. You can take it before you listen to another word of this episode. And then at the end of this 4-part series and after the end of listening to that book, they want you to take the assessment again and just see how far you've grown in a very short period of time. And so I challenge you each to do that. But there's all kinds of tools out there that you can pay for, probably small amounts of money, to ask and query and get a 360 review amongst your team and find those gaps for yourself if you so are inclined.
So Bobby, let's define it a little bit further, and we'll give some kind of signs of low emotional intelligence. We'll talk about kind of why we're doing the series further. Go from there. So to kind of define this, your EQ, or that's your emotional quotient, or that's just kind of the numerical measurement of your emotional intelligence, is your ability to identify and understand emotions in yourself and in other people. And then you use this awareness, because you're kind of seeing this from a bird's eye view about yourself. You're using this awareness to manage your response to other people, even to your own emotions and your relationships. And so we act on emotional impulses because we've got neural signals in our brain that pass through the emotional center. That's our limbic system before it reaches our logic center. So it's kind of recognizing this occurring before we take a too quick of a response to it, right? So really we're kind of slowing down this process, recognizing the situation at hand, and then kind of fixing what could be our instinctual reaction to something like this. Because I think by instinct most people are very selfish people, right? Like if we're not measuring ourselves from an outside perspective, we might all tend to be very selfish. And so we learn to mature and we learn to not be selfish because we're kind of slowing down this process and kind of seeing it from a bird's eye view, and then able to intervene and manage relationships better.
Are you quick-witted? Are you someone who like instantaneously has an emotional reaction when someone says something? So for me, I very much was, man, early on in my career, and I think I used to always blame it on my law enforcement time, but early on, someone could say something, someone could pick on some work that I've done, and I would react. I mean, I would probably blow my top and react to that, right? And I think that's the first sign of not being able to have a strong EQ. And so if you know those people that kind of have those signs of low emotional EQ, right? They become argumentative, would be me in those days. And it would be a defense mechanism to say, no, my work wasn't sucky and this was good. And, while I was thinking of the intentions of the work, the work might not have been great. And I was reacting to their feedback as if they were attacking Bobby Doss and they were attacking my work. And, it was really hard for me to keep up with that emotions. And the one thing that I've learned over the years, and this won't solve it for everyone, but if I could just wait 4 seconds to not react to something physically or emotionally or verbally, it would change the game for me personally. And
I would have a tendency, Bobby, to kind of blame others, whether I knew I was doing it or not know I was doing it. I would kind of, if a situation would come up to where something didn't go, like a sale didn't go the way I wanted it to go, or
you probably blamed it on the partner.
That's right, blamed it on the partner. Or if I didn't get the promotion that I wanted, or whatever, right? Like my my first instinct would be to say, well, it was because of this political situation, or if it was because, it was because the customer didn't, they weren't an intelligent customer, like they couldn't even understand our value, right? Rather than looking introspectively at what I missed, like what are my, we probably spent a lot of the first year talking about kind of how we progressed up through the ranks at tech companies, and about how at the time it felt like we were living or dying on that next role, right? But like having 10 years perspective on that all, we look back and we're like, gosh, we just didn't have the experience.
Yeah.
And that was a lack of maturity and a lack of self-reflection that we did not have 10 years ago, or 15 years ago when all this was going on. And instead we were blaming others. I was blaming other people about how could they not see that I'm not ready to take on this leadership role.
So a few other signs there that I guess are buckets of things that we can address over this series would be the other signs for low EQ or EI, emotional intelligence, would be people that don't listen. I'll probably say this a lot throughout the series, but another one that I struggled with, I was so focused on getting my point across and or climbing the ranks that I did a lot of not listening and focusing on myself, which turns someone into more of a talker, right? They say more than they listen to. We know those people, and those people are all people that you should refer to this podcast. Brian talked about blaming others. I talked about being argumentative, and then I think emotional outbursts, right? I can remember a friend of ours, co-worker, manager of ours, we'll call him Matt for this episode, was challenging and trying to help me be a better manager. And we set up a scenario where I was going to be in a room, and we were going to try and see how I could work on my emotional intelligence in that room. And I thought I did a great job. And he asked me how many times I slammed my fist into the table, and it was probably upwards of 3 or 4, right? And it was only for the best, but people weren't listening, Brian. I needed to get my point across.
Or you were passionate.
I was passionate.
Yeah.
It was a way for me to turn it always into something that was a positive. But, man, I wasn't very good at really taking in the room and hearing everyone's opinion, which made me not get those early on opportunities. And it took a while and experience, like we already said.
And I think, so I've collected some data. So I did some research and found, so what does this mean? Like, we know instinctually this will have repercussions, and some of those repercussions could be just broken relationships. They could be, again, not getting that promotion. But there's some hard data on a lot of this stuff now too. One of the most interesting studies I read said that when EQ first appeared to the masses, it served as the missing link in a peculiar finding. And that finding was that people with average IQs outperform those with the highest IQs 70% of the time. And that's because people with low EQ but high IQ don't have the ability, or struggle with the ability, to handle interpersonal problems. And they have unsatisfactory teams because, like, whenever they're going through difficulty or conflict, they don't have the ability to adapt, to adjust, or to elicit trust in their team, because they do respond emotionally, or they are blaming others, or they're being argumentative rather than like being a true leader. They're pointing fingers and not taking the blame. So the team doesn't want to follow that. That's chaos. The teams don't follow under chaos.
No question. And the statistic that I think was in the first few chapters of Emotional Intelligence 2.0 was one that I found shocking, was that 90% of high performers have high EQs without even reflecting on their aptitude or IQs. And out of all the low performers, only 20% of them have a high EQ. And so if there's one attribute, and what this show's all about is making you a better tech sales rep, it would lend to believe that this would be a very powerful component that needs to be in our wheelhouse to be a better tech seller and to be a high performer and to get big commission checks. And so since we know we can change this one, no matter where we're at on the spectrum, everybody should be willing to invest a lot of time to get to that high performance bucket and have high EQ.
Indeed. Jack Welch said it really best. He was kind of the architect of GE and its restructure and massive success before tech ate the world. But known as a great leader and really one of the innovators in defining EQ, emotional intelligence, from a business perspective. He kind of took this philosophy and applied a lot of business principles to it, and took his leadership team through a lot of this stuff too. And he said, his quote is, "No doubt, emotional intelligence is more rare than book smarts, but in my experience, it actually is more important than in making a leader. You just can't ignore it." And so it's widely recognized, again, like this is not, people that are working on this aren't displaying immaturity by addressing it later in life. It's just because, again, senior leaders are looking at this stuff and trying to improve themselves here and find holes in how they approach situations. And so, Bobby, I thought we would kind of finish up the episode by talking about the 4 different components that make up emotional intelligence. And it's kind of in a 4-box, and we'll also put this in the show notes. But there's basically 4 different components of this. In the first category, there's recognition. This is kind of this is yourself. This is how you react to things that are happening around you and inside of you. So recognition is self-awareness and social awareness. And then regulation, this is how you manage things on the outside, is self-management and relationship management. So let's talk about self-awareness. This is probably the most well-known. When people say, "Oh, that person lacks self-awareness," sometimes they're conflating that with something else. But self-awareness is the most recognized of the emotional intelligence components. And let's talk through the list a little bit. So the first one under self-awareness is self-confidence. So just being able to carry yourself in a way that, what Jordan Peterson's book in the first chapter is, stand straight up with your shoulders back. So having confidence in yourself, in the way you deliver messages, and be well researched, and be confident in what you're doing. It's a big part of self-awareness. Again, that will get conflated sometimes with not picking up, like you being egotistical would be pushing that obviously too far, but that is certainly a component of self-awareness. Awareness of your own emotional state. I think we all know people, have worked with people that they're not reading themselves. They're not reading how they're reacting to situations. They don't recognize that they maybe didn't get enough sleep last night and they're snapping at people.
They also probably, I've known a few people that weren't bashful and intentional about on the negative end of the spectrum, right? They ruled by fear and uncertainty, right? They wanted you to feel like your job was constantly a risk, right? So their emotional state drove a level of negativity across the team that kind of scared everybody, and they were probably managed like that at some point and somewhat had some success, so they repeated that. But that's not what teams want to do, right? Find a group of 20-somethings now, the group that most call millennials, and say, okay, let's rule a group of millennials with an iron fist and see how well that goes over. I don't think it's going to be very well, but there are people that I've seen, Brian, that have an awareness of their emotional state and are intentionally negative, and that creates a terrible level of self-awareness for them and their team, and really will crush a bunch of really good people really quick if managers do try to do it on purpose.
Yeah, I had one of the guys that worked for me. We had a one-on-one that was on Monday mornings, and I'm not in a bad mood on Monday mornings, but Monday mornings are not Friday mornings, and they're certainly not Friday afternoons. And so I was probably just a little bit more businessy, right? Like not being very personable in the one-on-one. And this is not like a forecast review. This is more just a one-on-one, getting caught up. And so what I did a terrible job of in that is I'd come to that meeting and just I'd have no personality at all. I was not in a bad mood, just not aware of my own emotional state, which is kind of like, I got a lot of crap going on this week, and this is like first meeting, and like we're in it in this first meeting, and that's not, And he reacted to that. He says, "Man, are you okay? Did something happen this weekend?" And I was not recognizing my own emotional states, and it has implications. I mean, it was good of him to bring it up, because that was years ago, and it's something I still think about. Certainly, anytime I have a Monday morning meeting.
Well, I've heard this 1,000 times, unfortunately, and it's something that sticks with me. And when I hear it now, like I sit down, regroup, and try to talk through it with people. But if I had $1 for every time somebody said, "Are you in a bad mood today?"
Yeah,
I would be a millionaire, unfortunately. But it is true that I probably carried a stench of frustration that wasn't frustration to me. I really wasn't frustrated, but it was this focus and desire to execute that kept me heads down, blinders on, and people that aren't like that look at that and go, "Man, he's pissed off today."
Yeah. And Bobby, finally, on self-awareness, is paying attention to how others influence your emotional state and how you react to other people's emotional state. Business is certainly, like in these times, we're recording this while all the COVID stuff is hopefully coming to an end. Hopefully we're right at the edge of having a vaccine for it. But it's tough. Like, business is tough. Sales is tough right now. It's not the booming economy that we've been used to since the growth started back in 2010. So we're taking fire from a lot of different directions, right? Like, getting new sales is difficult. There's metrics, targets are being missed, and all that kind of stuff. And if your approach is negative in all business, and you're not like slowing down and recognizing what's going on around you, you're going to drive people away. Certainly, if you're a leader, if you're an individual contributor, you're probably just sowing seeds of doubt, right? Like, which isn't helpful. Like, go somewhere else. If you don't believe the company is doing good things and being innovative and that kind of stuff, then like, you should find something else to go do. But complaining about it, or being a leader that's complaining about other people about it, and you're impacting other people's emotional states, which it's toxic for a work environment. No doubt. So the next grouping is social awareness, and this is picking up the mood in the room. This is a difficult one. This is one that people probably have the biggest challenge learning if they don't already have a good measurement of this. And this is where you are, whether it's a relationship with somebody that you work with, or friends or family, it's caring about what other people are going through. It's recognizing the mood of the room. When somebody at lunch at work says, "Man, I'm going through this," maybe they don't even say it's a tough time, but they call out a challenging situation that's going on in their home life. You always have the guy on the table, girl at the table, that's like ready to move on to the next subject, right? That doesn't even recognize what this person's trying to get off their heart. And they're lacking, in that scenario, they're lacking social awareness of what's going on around, instead of like slowing down. And that person deliberately said some word, or maybe they didn't even intend to solicit some sort of response from you that's going to give a caring reaction, but they're saying something that's heavy on their heart. And there are many people that just aren't good at recognizing the tone of the room and reacting appropriately to the tone of the room.
This is one where I think once I figured out that people were really different than me, it helped me be better as both a teammate and a manager. I think, and the statement that worked for me, which may apply to some, might not apply to everybody, but this results-driven orientation for Bobby Doss that was about go, win, 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 wasn't what everybody else wanted or focused on. Some wanted the flexibility of the tech sales work schedule and these other things. And a mentor of mine said, "Look, the best team in the world is going to have a Bobby Doss and 4 people that are almost Bobby Doss and 2 people that are nothing like Bobby Doss. And that you managing that balance amongst all those people is what's going to make a great team." And I didn't realize that you needed to have the diversity of that team from a emotional quotient standpoint, right? That I needed different people to feel different ways. And what's really hard as you get to managing and trying to address more people is that if you had 2 people, one's happy, one's sad, you probably can see that. Take that and add it to 10 people and say 2 are really unhappy, 2 are really happy, and 6 people are kind of mediocre. How do you get all those people motivated and take 10 people and turn it into 50 people like the Sparktown Houston office? And I found it literally got more difficult the more those teams grew, because you find yourself really and truly not being able to appease the whole group. You have to literally have a broad message that brings hope and happiness, and then you have to really sit down and talk to every individual or your management team and hope they transverse it back to their team members, because it just gets too big too fast, and you can't pick up the mood of every person in the room. But there probably is an overlying theme, and I think as when I learned that, Brian, that there was this diverse group of people from an emotional quotient standpoint that I had to be aware of. Some that needed a hug, some who didn't want you to hug them, whatever. That's hard to do, and you have to just address it in yourself and come ready to be very diverse in the way you handle it, for sure.
Yeah, I think some people are not bad at this as much as they are probably a little too fast in how they deal with other people, and maybe that's just as bad, right? Like for me, I'm sure for a lot of people listening, we've got busy schedules, and it's hard for me to slow down and recognize what someone is saying, and maybe where their headspace is at. Because look, I got a meeting that starts in 20 minutes, so let's get through this conversation. Whereas a much better version of me can slow down a little bit and maybe push that next meeting and kind of be more aware of what's going on in the conversation.
Another bullet on this list from social awareness is caring what others are going through. And it happened to me probably 15 years ago now. But someone was in the dumps. I had a lot of work I wanted to get done. I had some things I needed to prepare for a big meeting. And it turned out that happened to be the anniversary of one of their parents passing away. And they just weren't, no matter what I did, no matter how important that deal was, I couldn't change that. And it's not something that people wear on their head that you can just say, oh, today's the anniversary of your mom passing away. And you just have to be aware that people have lives, and that that kind of stuff sticks with people. And it was that experience for a close friend that I wasn't aware of that at all, made me reflect and realize, man, a lot of people can be going through a lot of stuff, and this work might not always be the most important thing to everybody. And that's one that I carry with me today, that when someone's in a bad mood, I kind of revert and say, today could be the day that their parents died, their anniversary. Give them a break, step back, take a deep breath. If it continues for a week or so, maybe try to address it. But I use that as kind of my trigger now to say, okay, give them a break. It could be a really bad day for them.
Yeah. So the final two we'll talk about, Bobby, are very closely aligned, but think of one as introspective and the other one more interacting with others. So self-management is how well you get along with others, as is relationship management. But in self-management, it's more about how you're handling your emotions during that conversation, whereas relationship management is more about you looking to actively be a part of that relationship. You're looking to actively foster a relationship versus, oh, this person, I can't work with this person. It's just not going to work out, right? So self-management is more your ability to clearly express, take a step back, clearly express your ideas and your thoughts, whereas relationship management is somebody approaches you with a thought or a comment. It's your ability to take a step back. Like your first instinct maybe be, that's terrible because it's not my idea, or it conflicts with my idea. But it's to take a step back, look at the lens that they may be viewing the world through, and then trying to find middle ground rather than it just being pure conflict. And this is really, really difficult to do. And it's something that constantly takes work. I think this is why the senior most leaders constantly work on this, is because you will become a dictator and somebody that is very hard to do business with if you can't see other people's perspective. And I think that's really what categorizes the regulation, is how do you see other people's perspective, and then how do you react in that so that you can foster a good relationship between the two people.
Love it. My Twitter feed and Facebook feed say that very many people aren't good at this, Brian, that everyone's very bad at this right now. But the reality on this one is, from a family standpoint, I kind of, as you talk through that stuff, I think of it from a family perspective. And of course, my kids don't have experience; they're young kids, and marriage is something you work on for many years. And I think that I can remember to my wife and my family that a lot of times you have to really sit down and talk about what they're trying to accomplish. What is this thing they're trying to accomplish in an argument or discussion? And I think it's the same thing through partnerships at work. And I remember saying often to partners and to people that I worked with, I can't be part-time married and we can't be part-time partners. We got to make this work. And that's why I think I was probably fairly good at the relationship management from a partnering perspective and being able to help them achieve their goals while I was still able to help me achieve my goals. I probably wasn't as strong necessarily as the self-management side and in clearly expressing my ideas individually to other teammates. And I've always kind of known that I could adapt and overcome with the customer and the partner, but I always kind of struggled a little bit more internally. And the broader group would have said the same thing. And it took me a lot of time for me to understand that it was that EQ component, that I was flipping a switch and adapting in real time when I was talking to a customer or a group of partners. And I didn't try to adapt internally. Like, why do I have to adapt internally? These people should just do what we want to do. Like, we're all focused on, it was just me.
Yes.
And I was focused on that. And in turn, I think if you feel that way and you're listening to this podcast, that's something for you to reflect on and for you to really dive into the next few episodes and change your EQ, because it'll make you more valuable to your team and to your company.
I could not agree more. I think they say that the people we love most, we hurt the most. And I think we almost become, we start to kind of maybe build up some scar tissue with how we react and how we respond. And to your point, like if it's a business partner or somebody that's, helping you make your business successful or grow your business, then you're actively working on this, right? Like there's a vested interest for you to get this right, except, maybe in a personal relationship, you're kind of willing to not burn a bridge, but just be more crass with this maybe. And it's the most important relationship of them all. So it's a really important one. And we'll unpack these two in the final episode of the series.
Yeah, my final point for today is that it never was intentional. I wasn't intending on poo-pooing on that relationship or their thoughts. I just didn't think I needed to do it. Like I forgot that they had something going on in their life. I just thought we were focused on doing the thing that meant the most to our company or to our bottom line, my commission check, and I lost sight of that. I never meant ill will, but boy, did I create some ill will along the way.
I think we all have stories like that, and I think anyone that listens to this, myself included, and thinks, "Oh, I got all these nailed," that is also a sign of low EQ. Like us doing a series on this doesn't mean we haven't mastered it all. It just means that there's an interesting framework, and it's a constant opportunity to improve.
No doubt.
So with that, Bobby, let's wrap up. Average is the enemy. Average sucks. Don't be average. Don't have a low EQ. Thanks for listening, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Sales Show. Subscribe to our email list at www.techsaleshow.com and follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Tech Sales Show. Until next week, average is the enemy.